Hello, and welcome to Mangasplaining, the show where we recommend great manga to folks who haven't read much manga before. Hosted by Deb Aoki, Christopher Woodrow Butcher, Chip Zdarsky, and myself, David Brothers. Follow along with our show notes and reading list at mangasplaining.com. And like I said in my intro, which I got on the first try, my name is David Brothers, and we are here to talk about some manga. This week, we're talking about Tite Kubo's Bleach, which is one of my favorite series and has been basically since I started reading Shonen Jump around whenever the magazine started in the US, 2002, 2003.
The physical magazine, you picked it up off the racks?
Whoa.
Yeah, a couple years ago I went to my grandparents' place and they still had half of the phone book volumes in the garage, which was very surprising. And they weren't as gross as I would have expected for something that's been in the attic for 20 years. But yeah, so back in the day, they used to publish Shonen Jump in print in the US, and it was kind of a phone book type anthology, let's say, where there's a bunch of issues and they're all maybe 200, 400 pages long. And it was an amazing way to read comics. I'd read like Marvel Comics Presents as a kid. I'd seen a little bit of 2000 AD by that point, which are all mostly short stories in an anthology. But these were like whole chapters, whole issues. So it really made an impression. And Bleach was one of those that really caught my eye because it had such like a funky style. Like it was clearly manga. It was clearly like Japanese comics. But something about the proportions and the styling and even the chapter titles for the different story arcs that were going on. It just felt different. And in terms of American perception, for a long time, the big three in manga were Bleach, Naruto, and One Piece. Three series that started more or less around the same time and all went on to like great success and then kind of differing success over the years. Naruto ended a few years back and relaunched as Boruto, which is the story of the son of Naruto. One Piece is 1,000+ chapters in at this point. Like I think it's neck and neck with like Action Comics and in much, much less time. And Bleach is one that just kind of ended and then went away. There haven't been a lot of movies, there haven't been a lot of, supplementary material. But they recently animated the last story arc for the manga, which kind of brought me back into thinking about how much I enjoyed looking at this book. And all that long preamble is to say, I wanted to bring this to Mangasplaining because it's such a singular work that I think you have to read dozens of volumes to really get it, like to kind of grow along with Kubo and those characters. But I really want to talk about the beginning and ending of shonen manga with the gang. So I thought reading the first volume of Bleach, the one that captured my eye, back when I was but a young lad, and then the beginning of the final arc of Bleach, which brought me back into the fold after I'd stopped reading Bleach for a long time. Kind of a weird idea. One might even say a cockamamie idea, but we're going to go for it and talk about the Bleach Volume 1 and 55. So we should say Lance Castleman and Joe Yamazaki get translation credit for Bleach. And Andy Ristino did the touch-up and lettering art on the first volume. I think different people were working by volume 55, but we'll get there later. So I'm obviously very in the bag for Bleach, and I like it. I think it goes interesting places, and I don't want to tilt the discussion one way or the other until I find out what the gang has to say. So, Christopher, how do you feel about Bleach?
I had the occasion I read this when it came out too. I was reading Shonen Jump off the racks when it was released. I was working at a comic book store then. So Shonen Jump, I would love to just spend the whole episode talking about the physical Shonen Jump monthly books in North America, because it's so interesting and why they had to change is so unfortunate. But I actually had the good fortune to go and reread the not oft-mentioned fourth horseman of these particular apocalypse people, which is Shaman King, which was the other series that was in Shonen Jump that launched at around the same time. But creator of Shaman King had kind of a falling out with the Shueisha, the Shonen Jump staff, and moved his work over to Kodansha. And it's just been in the process of being re-released by Kodansha. So I actually started at the beginning and I read the first omnibus volume of Shaman King because, I didn't really get into it back in the day, but it's like, there's got to be something else here. And yeah, rereading this was very similar as an activity because there's a lot of stuff that did not age well in both Shaman King Volume 1 and in Bleach Volume 1. None of it is where it ends up being. And actually, from the first chapter of both, I had a really hard time figuring out how this actually ever got popular. By the end of the first volume, I was in a different place. I was like, okay, I could see how he's, but I could not figure out how he got through like the brutal slog and that is the Shonen Jump like mill, right? Where they're like, oh, you're not popular on your first 3 chapters, you're done. And we saw that a little bit with, I was thinking back, which shonen have we read? Which Shonen Jump have we read? I'm thinking about it back about Naruto and My Hero. And Naruto, I think we all realized, got massively retooled after like the 3rd chapter. That was already the 3rd version of Naruto that he had tried to do before they published it. So I am I'm a little shocked at this, at the volume 1, because I think it is, I don't think it's good, but it has a lot of things in it that a certain young fan might really enjoy. So I could see how it could hook you, but it's just, this was, when did when did this originally come out in Japanese? Do you know?
2002. 2001, I'm sorry.
Okay, so over 20 years ago. The formula for the first chapter of a Shonen Jump title has come a long way in 20 years. Was the big thing, because I could see the formula going along with chapter 1 and then with volume 1. And we often talk about it like it's a formula that Shonen Jump uses. So how much has it really changed? But like, yeah, there's a lot going on in this first book. So yeah, I didn't enjoy it, but I think it's interesting. And I think I actually loved going and reading volume 55 as well. I'll save that for the second half. But I actually, yeah, I don't know. I feel bad too, because I know how much you like Bleach, and I don't see what's in this first volume for people that makes it, that elevates it, let's say, above other similar material. And I wanted to, like, I actually don't like it when I'm the guy who doesn't like your picks. It makes me feel bad. But yeah.
It's okay. Your hate only makes me stronger. So bring it on.
Well, good. Working it out. All right. See, yeah. That's what I thought. Never ask me to go first again. I always feel bad.
And Deb, how about you? How did Bleach strike you? Were you a reader back in the day? We can call this back in the day because it was 20 years ago. It's kind of
I guess so.
Yeah.
I guess I wasn't like an early adopter of Bleach. You know, I got the magazine, but I wasn't ever a subscriber. So, well, no, I was a subscriber because I still have the Yu-Gi-Oh cards to prove it. They used to come with the Yu-Gi-Oh cards. That was supposed to be a key value add.
Yeah.
If you subscribed. Yeah, I don't know. It's like reading the first volume again. It was like, wow, it was so different than what it like volume 55 is. Because he spends a lot of that first chapter explaining a ton of stuff. You know, like, oh, like this is Ichigo. Ichigo can see ghosts. His sisters can kind of see him, but not as good as he can. And you know, and then there's this whole thing about the Soul Society, and he has to explain all the lore in like 2 chapters, right? And it makes it super dense.
Yeah.
Kind of like, you know, like the indie band that like puts all their heart and soul into that first album, like everything they got. He just threw everything out there. Like you either get it or you don't. Like Chris was alluding to, it's any new Shonen Jump series kind of comes with this time limit, this clock, right? Like you got to sell readers on the concept of your story within 5 chapters or you're gone. So you can kind of get this sense of like he's doing the song and dance really fast to try to get you on board with his concept. But it's interesting because it's the way it starts out. It starts out as a kind of like a comedy, right? Like Ichigo's got like his dad and his sisters who don't respect him, and the ghosts, they're kind of goofy, little goofy too. And then it's like, oh, and then Rukia, it's like she ends up going to school with him. So like it's a high school comedy a little bit, right? Like, oh, there's this high school kid with a secret other life, like nighttime side job killing demons. And there's tons of stories like that. There's like Kekaishi, which I also love a lot.
Sorry, don't mention that manga. People are going to inundate our podcast with people begging for Viz to finish the series somehow.
No!
Kekaishi is like one of the great unfinished manga, and now they're just going to come for us. They're going to come for us.
No, it finished.
Wait, Kekaishi finished it?
Yeah. I have
What's
the entire...
I'm thinking of?
Gintama.
Oh, no, now I mentioned it.
Oh, you've done
I've
it.
summoned them. I'm sorry.
No, Gintama finished. No, sorry. Kikaishi finished, and it's awesome, and you all should read it.
Okay.
The thing that kind of it got pretty fashionable at a certain point to make fun of Bleach, right?
Mhm.
Like Bleach was coasting. Bleach is just like endless fighting, and where's it all going? Revisiting Volume 55, it's like, oh, that's right. This is when he kind of started doing his victory lap.
Yeah.
Started getting everything all together and saying, I'm gonna end the story, and I'm gonna end it with a bang. I'm gonna tie all the loose ends up, and it's gonna be epic. And so you see, it's interesting because if you go straight from Volume 1 to 55, you don't even think it's the same story. Like art-wise, tone-wise, there's a ton of lore, there's a ton of vocabulary, like the different tribes, like the Quincy's and the Arancars and blah, blah, blah. And the only way you can tell them apart is because some of them speak Spanish and some of them speak German, something like that. But I think he's a great artist. I just feel like he kind of got, I don't know, I think it's impossible to. Let me. So like in Kamen Rider, where we thought Kamen Rider, like Shotaro Ishimura, was just making shit up every week.
Yeah.
Sometimes Bleach felt like that. Like, let's make this whole fight last for one whole chapter, and the background is all white because they're in this white world. It's white subworld.
Classic artist move.
Oh, classic. Brilliant.
And so everyone was, oh, he's just coasting, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when we did the best and worst manga panel one year, and you said Bleach was the best, and everyone groaned at you.
Oh, that's super funny. It was super funny. People got so mad at me.
It got so fashionable to diss Bleach as being kind of lazy or just big swords and fighting. But
Yeah.
David stood up for Bleach, and we are here talking about Bleach today because David still believes in Bleach.
He continues to stand up for Bleach.
Yes.
Good job.
I 100% respect that. Anyway.
Nice. And so, Chip, I feel like this is giving you X-Men #1 by Stanley and Jack Kirby, and then X-Men #1 by Jim Lee and Chris Claremont, like back to back.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
Except I don't think X-Men #1 by Lee and Kirby was very good. Whereas I think this first volume is actually pretty decent.
I'll take
there's
it.
There's an energy there. It's not for me, for sure, at the ripe old age of 47. But reading it, I'm just like, oh man, like I really would have dug this if I came into it at a younger age. If I was like in my teens or something, I think I would have really enjoyed this. Partly because of all the front-loading stuff. Like all the explanations of the, oh, but they mean this and this and that and this and the powers and the hollows or whatever. I think I would have dug that a lot as a younger reader. And the energy and the humor really spoke to me. Because there are some actual like funny things in this first volume. Like, I forget her name, but the girl who imagines her racing against him.
Oh, yeah. Orihime.
They pass the other racer. She's like, all of a sudden she's got boxing gloves, and then someone from the crowd comes out with a gun. It just makes no sense. It's super funny, and then she comes to reality. She's like, look out, run, champ.
Yeah.
Like, it's so dumb and so funny. And then, there was like the really kind of like the tender moment, like the story of like the deceased brother and the sister, and when the sister finally gets to say like, have a nice day. Right at the end of her life, the thing that she was supposed to say to him before she realized it was like the last time they'd see each other. I'm like, that's actually really sweet, and especially in like kind of a young person manga. It's like it's almost too old of an idea for kids, for the youth. But I think it really really worked here. And it's super sweet. I know I wasn't necessarily a fan of the art, but I was a fan of the energy of the art. You could tell in volume 1 that they just want to get as much onto the page as possible. Like, they're just like, all right, let's do this. Like, this is my shot. And yeah, I liked it. I actually liked volume 1 more than I liked volume 55.
Interesting.
because like it's funny you compare this like X-Men 1 to X-Men 1, but that's kind of off. I think it's X-Men 1 to like X-Men 257 or 259 or 362, because at least with that second X-Men 1, you're kind of introduced to it, and like everyone still kind of explains like, oh, I'm the best at what I do. What I do isn't very nice. Oh, share. If I touch you, I steal your powers. Whereas Volume 55 here did not have that. Like Volume 55, I'm just like, what? What are they saying? Who are they talking about? What is this? What's that guy? Like the language in Volume 55 is just is as convoluted as like any kind of random issue of the X-Men from the 90s or something.
Yeah,
For sure. I felt like my dad. I felt like if I had handed X-Men to my dad, like, you just gotta read an issue, you'll get it. And my dad's just like, what are they? Some totality of my psychic powers? What is she talking about? Like, just like it felt like that kind of language to me now as an old man.
I love it. I was curious how it would hit because, like, I realized reading these back to back that Shonen manga build up so much lore over the course of the series. There are all these like major villains that last for dozens of volumes and are never mentioned again except when the hero needs motivation. There are all these like special powers and things. In the first volume, Ruki is like, I lost all my dark force. They never call it that again. Like it's just, like he reinvents the setting and the story so often. What did you think of the art in volume 55?
Okay, I think my expectations were higher.
Okay.
Because we've done this before a little bit, like with My Hero Academia, we read volume 1, which was like okay art, and then I remember you showing us like, oh, here's like volume whatever. I'm like, oh wow, they really stepped up. Whereas with this, I'm like, oh, they stepped up in some ways and back in others. Like there's definitely a lot of like cutting corners in the later volume, and there's a discrepancy between the various artists working on it because it feels like there's multiple artists working on it. Like just some really kind of weird light detailing that just doesn't help at all, versus like kind of some of the bolder figures. So I'm just like, oh, it's a weird mix. I think volume 55. So it was, strangely, even though it's more amateur, I probably like the art in volume 1 more.
Nice.
I was just gonna say before when we were talking about like all the lore and like the stuff that I couldn't quite catch, I literally just opened up a random page at the end of volume 55, and the first 2 speech balloons said, I did expunge 28,000 residents of Rukongai using 12 company officers without authorization to correct the Kompaku equilibrium. How am I supposed to know what any of that means? There's nothing in this that helps me figure that out.
Yeah. Oh, man. And it's funny, looking at this, I'm like, oh, yeah, obviously he disappeared a bunch of ghosts from this one district. Like, it makes sense because I've read this so often.
Yeah.
But it is like Star Trek nonsense, basically.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
The one thing I think of with Bleach every now and again is Yu Yu Hakusho as kind of a predecessor to it, which was a phenomenally successful and popular Shonen Jump manga, also about like a ghost hunter, essentially. There's this kid who would get an assignment to go and have to go fight a ghost and shoot it with his, ghost laser pistol cannon. And I think this has kind of a similar treatment of a main character where, like, he's a delinquent, but everyone likes him and he's fundamentally a nice guy. Which is this thing that pops up in shonen manga over and over. Like, Naruto's this kind of guy. I think Luffy is a little more honest about being that type of guy. But the characters are such sketches, such types to me sometimes. And I was curious, Christopher, did anyone strike you as being particularly interesting or resonant? Like rereading this time around?
The girl whose brother turns into a hollow.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Orihime? She was great. I thought the humor that Chip mentioned with her like having like a fantasy sort of sequence, that was maybe my favorite part of the first volume. I thought that was great. I think her character design is like shonen girl design number 2. Number 1 is whatever her name is. Number 2 is the klutzy cute friend with huge boobs who does like whatever. And like her character design in that first volume is just like, wow, we know why you're there. But I think her character is really interesting. And I was totally in love with the fact that she's still around in volume 55, actually. I thought that was super cool, where she's like got healing powers and stuff now. And she's like, that's actually great. I was so happy to see that she didn't suffer shonen girl syndrome, where it's just like, we made you underpowered until you're useless and we get rid of you. So that was cool. I liked her, and I liked that she was legitimately funny and that she was integral to the plot, and she has a history with the lead character, but it isn't set up in like a Nisekoi kind of bullshit way where it's like, we're actually going to be together forever kind of stuff. It like felt very much like a natural. That was a drive-by on Nisekoi, by the way. It's just like the worst shonen romance. Yeah, I liked it. I liked her a lot, and I think I liked just the brief glimpses of her we got in volume 55 as well. She seemed like she had been through a lot as a character and still had a lot to offer, and that was kind of cool. Thinking back to volume 1, I don't know, the Man Mountain dude that's introduced in the last chapter, who's on the cover
Chad?
of one of the later volumes. Yeah, Chad. He seems fine. He seems like an interesting character. Like they're all types. They're all types in the first volume, and they don't go much beyond that in the first volume. So it's tough to say, but I didn't find any of them objectionable. But I think the possible love interest lady, or girl, I guess, in this volume was maybe the most potentially interesting to me. And it's cool that she's in volume 55. Yeah.
And Deb, so the last episode of the podcast I edited as we're recording this is the Baki episode, where we talk about your Fujoshi meter.
Oh, no.
And I was wondering, how does Bleach strike you? Is there any Fujoshi bait in here? Anything good on that front?
Oh, so much. So much. Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I'm so divorced from it now. Like, I don't even remember what were the big pairings. You know, because obviously Naruto and Sasuke is the big pair, right?
Yeah.
And with this one, I don't know what the pair was. Was it Ichigo and Chad?
I think Ichigo and Ishida.
No, it's that other pretty boy from line 55 with the glasses.
Yeah, the nerd.
That guy.
Oh,
the
no,
rival.
wait, no, it was the guy with the red hair. It was not in this volume.
Oh, Abarai.
Right.
Yeah, him too. Yeah. I love that guy.
It was kind of fun because for a period of time, like you could tell whenever Tite Kubo introduced a new character because it would show up as cosplay at a show. It's like, oh, that's a new Soul Reaper. Okay. And then there was a period of time when people had like their big foam version of the sword. And that's when anime cosplayers figure out like, oh, this shit's heavy to carry around all day, even if it's foam. So,
God, now I want like an oral history of cosplay. Like when someone broke through this particular barrier, like, oh, foam.
right? Because I actually thought people make it out of wood, and that is the biggest mistake for this huge blade, right?
Oh, that would be actually really fascinating. Yeah, that's true.
I like it.
I mean, I enjoyed like some of the humor, right? Because by the time you get to 55, Chad and Uru and like Orihime, they have this little, like, this kind of chemistry or this kind of friendly type of bickering going on. Like Chad, I think it's like page 51. It's like, we'll go help you fight this guy as soon as we finish eating. And then Ichigo yells back, I'll be done by then. You know, like, you dumbasses. Like, it's very, like, fighting demons is, like, it's every day, right? Like, you know, it's like, I'll be done before you guys finish eating your ramen kind of thing. And so that was kind of charming. And then the part about, like, oh, it's like, you know, someone puffing up their chest, being proud of something, and the other person saying, you don't have much of a chest to puff out. Like,
classic anime joke.
Classic.
So some of it's like, oh, that's good. He didn't lose his goofy sense of humor that we saw in volume 1. But, you know, as far as like the Fujoshi thing, like I think he's just always had really some pretty studly male characters.
Yeah.
But he's also had really good female characters, and he's also had some nice diversity going on. Like Chad is Mexican, Japanese. I think there's been some, I don't know about black, but dark skinned characters. So it's kind of been neat to see that he introduces so many different types of people: old, young, big, thin, short, tall. Like, it's interesting, and so it makes it a little easier to follow sometimes. Although it is a huge cast. It
Yeah.
is a huge cast of characters, and it's intimidating to keep up with. But yeah, I think there's a Fujoshi appeal to it, but I don't think it's as high as Haikyuu, for example. Like Haikyuu, that's through
Oh
the
yeah,
roof.
Haikyuu is ruthless.
Yeah. Wait, let's make Chip read Haikyuu next. It's a volleyball
no.
manga.
Well, I do like volleyball.
But I like the way he draws action.
Mm.
Like, I think there's a certain elegance to how he shows force and sword strokes with different lines and heavy blacks, and that like this person's swords strikes look like breaking glass, and this guy's powers look like fire, and it's all done with just pen and ink in different ways. He puts ink on the page, and I thought that was really elegant.
Yeah. The art's a big draw of this for me. I agree, Volume 1 looks super rough, especially right next to Volume 55.
Mm.
But there's something about like the evolution from like a 24-year-old kid drawing everything he can to like a 40-ish dude being like, I can still draw whatever I want and nobody can necessarily stop me. And there are some pages in here where you can really feel it. And it makes it exciting to read. Like, learning how to read comics art has made like reading comics so much better for me. Just like studying the storytelling, figuring out like why people make the decisions that they make. And this guy has such a singular style. Like, I can't think of many people who do this kind of like, not pretentious, but like artistic fight scenes like you're talking about. Like, there's so many people who just kind of explode into blood or, have like this weird 2D, 3D effect on their moves. I don't know. It's really appealing. Chip, what did you...
I gotta push back. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I have such a hard time with the storytelling in this book. And I
Really?
kind of thought it, like, I didn't think it was just me, but if you flip to 132, 133...
Volume 55?
Volume 1, sorry.
Volume 1.
Oh.
Yeah.
And I didn't find the storytelling much easier in Volume 55, honestly. It was the thing that I felt like had improved the least in terms of his art. But, like, this... I don't know, like, the first time through, okay, like 132, Snake Tails coming at him, close up on Snake Scales with the sword, close up on his face, explosion, like, he's, like, skidding out of the, like, I guess the window, but his, like, hand is on the ground at the same time, but he can't be on the ground for that clap noise because he's in midair. Like,
Yeah.
I find it very, very hard to follow when people are fighting. And he does this thing where, like, he doesn't show a lot of the impacts sometimes. He'll, like, have someone about to attack on the end of a page, and then at the beginning of the next page, the attack has already happened, and we're seeing the, like... It really feels unconfident in a way that a lot of the other shonen that we've read, like, there are more direct actions. I think we were talking about... You brought this up with Ranma, with Rumiko Takahashi, where she's not generally showing every single movement. She's just showing sort of like the before and then the after kind of a thing. And I find that, at least with Baki, every movement was super clean. Like, you could follow how the characters were moving through space in a way that I really appreciated. And maybe I'm just an old man now, actually, as well. But, like, I found the storytelling in this, the visual storytelling, even before we get into Volume 55, was like, as if it's not confusing to drop in like lore words, to just drop in other random bits from other languages as well. Like, I found the storytelling very confusing pretty much throughout the first volume. And I guess I'm on my own on that. I don't know.
There are parts that were confusing, but there were parts that were just like really fun and things that I haven't really seen a lot of. Like, even in that fight scene you're talking about, like, I love on the top of 135 where the end of the tentacle hits him, and it's such a fun angle for that smack, and then the second panel just being that impact,
like, where he's hitting on the ground.
Yeah. I really there are things like that.
That's what's happening in that panel. I could not make out what was happening in that panel at first, because the sound effects are huge and in English, and that's whatever. But like, yeah, so he's getting hit. That's like the back of the tentacle, because I couldn't tell
Yeah.
if it was a physical thing hitting him or it was just like when characters. If you look at page 134 and you see where the acid hits and it sort of has a splash effect. Sometimes like movement leaves a trail of like empty white space, and I thought like something had hit him and moved on, and I couldn't tell what was. I couldn't tell what was going on, but I guess
all the Soul
anyway.
Reapers can basically fly, and then also move in the air like this if they're on the ground. Because
Sure,
probably the most important part of the series is that if it's cool, Kubo puts it into the comic, which is why there's so much
why not?
Spanish and German, and they're all from like different locations in the afterlife.
Yeah.
134 has the clearest storytelling where it's like guy spits venom, medium shot reaction of Ichigo where he's like venom is coming. Next panel, venom has hit him. Next panel, venom is burning him. Next panel, he's looking at his hand and going acid. Next panel, close up on his face. But then like that hit just comes out of nowhere at the like there is clear storytelling here. Like he knows how to tell a story. Or like the section where that's a whole page just before this sequence starts where girl with the R name, what's her name, is hiding in the closet at their house.
Rukia?
Yeah. Page 99, where it's a whole page with almost no text, where she's just hiding in the storage area, the storage closet where you put your futons at night. And that's where she lives now, which I thought was actually a pretty funny gag. That page was super clear and had like a lot of breathing and a lot of like it's almost like it comes from a different manga to me, because all the other stuff that's happening is like the next page has just so much random shit going on. And
well, that's I think that's the point of it.
Yeah, like, it's a pacing joke.
Yeah, and I think it's great. I actually really
but also
like it. I would love more of that.
It's the comparison of like, that page 99 is very like it's clear, but it's also very boring. Like there's not even a lot of like size differentiation between several of the panels. But then when chaos happens, then it gets confusing. Like I think that's kind of part of the appeal of those fight scenes is that like some of it's hard to make out on the first go round, which is how it would be in that fight. But then if you look at it again,
it's unclear on the page because it would be unclear in real life. That's a stretch, bro.
I think it kind of works. There's some merit to it because
especially once you hit volume 55, because a lot of the action is like really weird kind of close-ups and weird crops. So it's very much like kind of throwing you into it and kind of discombobulating you a bit as a reader. I'm not saying it's necessarily successful, but there's clearly stuff in here that is successful that shows that they know what they're doing. Like 115, like there's some really nice panels in this volume 1. Like that teddy bear with a hand exploding out of her back, and then that close up of her eye, and then her falling back. Like it's really, really well done. This is as good as any of the kind of the great manga that we've talked about before. But yeah, I mean, they could spend more time, I think. Like, that one page you point out, 133, where you're like, he's skidding on the ground. No, he's skidding in air. Like, it's a cool idea, and it's a cool shot, but he could have set it up better so the reader understood what the rules are in this manga, because that panel is too cluttered, especially once you put in the word balloon to really sell the fact that he's skidding as if it's the ground, but he's above all those houses. So I think there's failure on the part of the artist to kind of properly convey, like I said, the rules of some of these things. But yeah. Maybe I'm defending defending the chaos of it too much. But I feel like on a certain level, it's like it works.
I think there's definitely an element of rushing to get to the hero shot sometimes, like that big super cool moment. Like the skidding is a great idea. Every 3 or 4 pages, you're like, oh, that's kind of cool. And by the time you get to the point where Orihime's hugging her brother's like ghost monster body, like while being swallowed at the same time, like that is a wild image.
Oh, it's a great image. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And volume 55, I'm so glad that Deb described this last arc as a victory lap, because all these, like everything from 55 on builds to those moments repeatedly for each character. Like everyone gets like their next moment in the spotlight. Even the way Ichigo is introduced in the volume, where there's these 2 goons who get jumped and then he shows up and then instantly defeats the bad guys. And it's like, oh, when they did the animation, that's when like the theme music like spun up really loudly, like all the metal was playing. It's like the cool moment. And as a kid, like it's not story light. Like there's still a lot of story, a lot of lore, a lot of storytelling going on. And I think it was the cool moments that kept me going more than anything else. Like I knew that I would get like at least one awesome drawing a week, which sometimes is enough, I think. And I still love the title pages. But so I want to end, before we do final thoughts, with a question of the shipping variety. Because one thing is that when Bleach ended, the final pairings were slightly controversial. People weren't super happy with the choices that Kubo made. So, Deb, who do you think Ichigo ends up with in the final volume of Bleach? Who's your best guess?
Isn't that super spoilery?
Yeah, but
Well, I
at
mean,
this
we'll
point,
let people know if they want to fast
Yeah.
forward.
I'm pretty sure it's Orihime, right?
yeah, Chip, who's your guess?
I have no guess. I don't know who any of these characters are.
He has no skin in the
I
game here.
have no
Yeah.
context really for any of that.
Christopher, how about you? Who do you think he ends up with?
If I had to pick, I'd pick Orihime.
And you haven't read this before, right?
No.
Why would you
So,
pick her over Rukia?
So, Rukia, thank you. I will use the correct name till the end of the episode.
Yeah, for the next 3
So
minutes.
I legitimately didn't vibe with enough things in this manga that I didn't need to pull shit out of thin air. I guess to do this, for example. But since we're doing that anyway, the art in volume 55 is much better. Chip is dead wrong because in volume 1, he looks like a sassy middle-aged lesbian.
Oh no,
In volume 55,
that's why I love it.
he looks like an actual teen boy. And I will put this image in the show notes, but oh my god, I can't believe this is supposed to be a 15-year-old. Anyway, it is amazing how much he has improved as an artist in 55 volumes. Hard to disagree with what Chip said before. So, like, yeah, I could just pull stuff out of the air. Why does the first chapter have to have a girl getting depowered? For the boy to do his job, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, stuff happens. So much stuff happens. Rukia is only briefly mentioned, I think, in one panel in volume 55 due to something or other. But, like, if they were going to be, they could just be coworkers. You could just have a platonic female friend. The childhood friend who's super in love with you maybe could be the one that you get together. Or, here's the thing, you could maybe grow and change as a person because it's not anime. Like, if it's not anime and you could meet anyone else in the intervening 20 plus years, like, why didn't they flash forward to the end to see who Ichigo's with? And it's just like, oh, it's a character you've never met because not everything important in your life happens when you're 16.
I don't
Anime.
know about that one.
Your move, anime. What? It's one of the things that I loathed about Harry Potter too. It's like all these characters, you're going to pair them all off one by one at the end of this book to make all the fans happy, and it's like gross. It's like people grow and change. We're not the people that we were when we're 9 or 10 or whatever, or 15 or 16. And like, if you met your high school sweetheart or your grade school sweetheart is who you married today, good, more power to you. I don't give a shit. But like, why in fiction do we want to pair up everybody that's been on the page until the very end? Like, that creeps me right out. So
because I didn't have a reader like studying my life when I was in high school and all the foibles I had with my girlfriend back then.
I would read that book.
Sure.
No one can do it but you, buddy. No one can do it but you.
That's true.
So, yeah, I would pick Orihime because of the options presented to me in volumes 1 and 55. She's the only one that seems like a person.
I like it. That's a very thorough answer.
Well, that was an interesting thing. Like the interview I did with him in 2018 at Comic-Con, he was kind of saying, like, why is everyone all bent on making this romantic?
Yeah.
or looking for pairings or looking for some kind of romance. This is not the story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, did you say you interviewed Kubo?
I did. Yeah.
Tell us more about that. I want more depth. I want more interviews with the author. That never happens on this podcast.
It's one of the few articles from my About.com manga days that has not disappeared into the ethers. It's still online.
Power of Bleach.
Yeah.
There you
No,
go.
he was kind of a rock star, right? I mean, like he came in the middle of his run, kind of like what's his name, the guy who did My Hero Academia, like in the middle of his run of his very popular series, versus Masashi Kishimoto and Hajime Isayama, who came after their series ended, and they had some breathing room.
Mm.
So very interesting. But it was also kind of like super funny because I said, "Oh, it was his first trip to outside of Japan to meet fans," and I said, "When did you figure out that your work is really popular with overseas fans?" And he goes, "Yesterday."
Wow.
So
Nice.
I'll put the link to the interview in the show notes, but
Yeah.
he was surprisingly droll.
Man, that was the same with Kishimoto. When I met Kishimoto Sensei, who created Naruto, I did an interview with him when he came to after Naruto completed, and when they were announcing that Boruto was coming, and he had no idea of the fame that he had in North America. Like, he's pretty, I think if you're a mangaka, you're pretty insulated from a lot of that. Like, you can't even talk to any of these dudes without going through their editor, and their editor has to go through the company president or the company, hierarchy. Anything you send to that guy goes through like 11 hands before it gets to him, and most of it doesn't get to him. But yeah, he had no idea that he was, like, you would see a sales figure and go, oh, Naruto sold just cracked 1 million copies in print, and he's like, oh, okay, that's okay, because in Japan it's at like 10 or whatever, right? But yeah, when he got there and he saw what a room of 3,000 people that were there to see him looked like, it blew his mind. Like,
Yeah.
it really blew his mind in a bad, like, maybe in a bad way, like, to be confronted with your popularity and have no idea it's coming. Like, imagine any of you walks into a room and there's 3,000 people chanting your name and the name of something that you made. It's just like, fourth letter, fourth letter, fourth letter. And David's just like,
I'd leave.
what has happened?
But also, I need some money, so I'd probably roll with it for a little bit. I don't know.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
So
Man.
yeah, that's wild. That's wild.
Cool. So we should do final thoughts. I'm gonna go last as my, host Fiat, and let's go Deb, Chris, and then Chip. Deb, what are your final thoughts on our little experiment here with reading Bleach?
I will say that it's been a while since I've read Bleach, and it's probably one that I'm kind of overdue to do a binge read like I did with One Piece, like reading it all the way through. Because it's such a different experience to read Shonen Jump as a complete experience rather than just dribs and drabs week by week by week, especially with Bleach, which kind of the dribs were kind of dribby. Like you would get like fight, end. And then you have to wait for the next week and it'll be more continuing the same fight. And they go like, wait, what just happened? Like, wait, who is this again? And like there's a lot of pieces going on. And so it would do me good to read it all over again and appreciate it anew and really get the sense of the arc of the evolution of the story and where it eventually went. So I'm excited to be reintroduced to this story again and have my curiosity piqued to do that.
I'll count that as a win. Christopher, what's your final thoughts on Bleach?
I liked it better than on this reread from 20 years ago. I liked it better than I liked Shaman King in the reread recently. Actually, not a lot, but I also didn't skip to the end of Shaman King like we did with this too. Yeah, volume 55 was impenetrable, and I think the X-Men comparison is so funny because it is just full of Claremontisms, where it's just like someone's talking and then they slip into German for 2 words for no reason. Yeah, like, awesome. Loved it. Very Nightcrawler. Yeah. So it was a really, putting my meta textual hat on for a second, it was a good episode of the podcast to do this. I'm actually super on board with it because I think we have done how does a creator develop over a long period of time, both in structured and unstructured ways. But something like this, it's such a singular work. And I think I think I was maybe on board with that idea, but hearing you guys talk about it actually has maybe convinced me a little bit more. It's like, yeah, he's just like, he is kind of a rock star where he's just like putting everything he wants to put onto the page at all times, whether it strictly works or not. And I think that's really cool, actually, on reflection, but it doesn't make for the best reading experience for me. But, he got 70 plus volumes, so he must know what he's doing, right? Like, he beat the Shonen Jump system, more or less. And I will actually ask you a question, just because I get to.
Yeah.
So Bleach ended. What was Burn the Witch?
Burn the Witch.
Because there was he did a weird sequel-y thing. Like, what is going on with that?
It's a standalone story.
I mean, it's almost
isn't it
literally Excalibur to This Is X-Men, in that it's set in
really?
the UK. And it's about dragons and their similar powers.
But it's set
like
in
a very
universe.
thin tie-in. Yeah, same. I don't want to say too much because there's plot reasons that they kind of get into.
Okay. Wild. And I like the fact that you could dress up like any of the girls in his class, like that uniform, that school uniform that he designed for this, it became cosplay because it was so popular at a certain point. So there's something here. I wish it was more obvious to me on reading it, and I'm glad I got to get a little bit more out of it from talking to you guys about it. But yeah, it's not going to go on my favorite shonen list, unfortunately. But yeah, I'm glad I got to read it. Thanks.
I'm going to call your bluff and get that list at some point. We're going to get down to the video.
Yeah.
I will drop into the other window and make it right now.
Chip, how about you? How was this experiment on your side?
I think it was only a failure in the sense that I bounced pretty hard off volume 55 because I couldn't quite follow or get into any of it.
Yeah.
But I still quite enjoyed volume 1, and I recognize that I would have enjoyed it even more if I'd come into it at a bit more of a formative age, I think. But it's one of those books that I could totally picture handing off to my 10, 11-year-old nephew to hey, you finished Naruto? All right, check this out.
Yeah.
And I think they totally get into it even now.
My 11-year-old nephew loved Bleach. That's your validation. Someone in my family loved it, so you're good to go.
I don't need validation.
No, it was David's. It was David's. Not that he.
I just know. I just know. Yeah.
I just assume I get validation all the time. It's really a big problem. I'm talking about it with my therapist. But too real for a moment. Yeah, Bleach Volume 1 and the 55. I think there's a lot of merit to what Christopher says, even though he's completely wrong about the series and storytelling. Because there was a point where I kind of quit reading Bleach. Once they got to, I think, the high 20s, early 30s in terms of volumes, I was like, there's one or two cool things happening each volume, but not a lot that I'm really feeling. So I took a long break from it. I think I said when I pitched this series that I was still getting the Shonen Jump subscription, the digital app. So I would always flip past it every week, getting to the comics that I actually wanted to read. And at a certain point, I was like, man, these drawings are getting really good again. And then I kind of slipped right back into reading Bleach just in time for the grand finale. And something I really appreciate about that is how, seeing one guy push his craft and his characters in a bunch of different directions. Some, to be fair, exceedingly cliche, like the everything with romance in this series. But then there's also a lot of moments that are here's our hero in the rain talking about what his mom means to him. These neat little melancholy bits that punctuate the bombastic action and the focused totality of his psychic powers. It makes it such a strange series to read sometimes, but kind of fun at the same time. It's very light despite dealing with such heavy things. And you're almost guaranteed to see something really awesome, which is, I think, what I want most out of comics these days. But yeah, it is also a book meant for teenage boys, so there's only so much you'll get out of it in your 30s and 40s, I believe. But that's fine, right? Hopefully.
Yeah.
I was already too old the first time I read it, so that's on me.
I've been jaded since I was born.
Right? But thank you all for talking about Bleach with me. It's been fun getting perspectives on something that I like so much and have flipped through so often. Even just the title pages or something I would call myself a fan of. I got a bunch of screenshots of those. They're all named good Radiohead songs is the only way to explain it.
Oh,
that's great.
I did have one last final thought.
Yeah.
Speaking of songs, they given Ashley McIsaac song as the favorite song of Rukia. I forgot her name already. Rukia in the last page. If you flip to the very last pages of Volume 1. It says what Ichigo's favorite song is and what Rukio's favorite song is. Rukio's favorite song is Wingstock from Hi, How Are You Today by Ashley McIsaac, who's a Canadian rock fiddle player, which was like,
Yep.
oh, that was kind of cool. I like that. He gave her like real depth. That's like a weird ass song to pick.
It's a very specific period in time.
It really is.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Well,
We'll have to dig it up. For the show
Ichigo's
notes.
is from Bad Religion, so there you go, from Stranger Than Fiction. So we'll put, maybe those will be our closing. Maybe we'll put little snippets of those in the episode
There you
somehow
go.
and not get demonetized. We'll see how it goes.
Well, that's what's really fun about him, right? Because he seems to really love. He mentioned in an interview how much he loves listening to music when he draws, and that influences how he draws. And he uses a lot of funky English in his title pages. He also draws some pretty nice looking clothes that doesn't exist in real life. So I think he's a stylish. He kind of always gave me this vibe of the guy who's drew manga, but he was not a nerd. Like he had a life outside of comics.
I will say, I forgot one thing in my final thought. One of my favorite jokes, the second best joke in comics after people getting confused for other people, is when someone draws poorly in a well-drawn comic book. Kills me every time. So every time Rukia explained the Soul Society stuff with the little bunny drawings, I was done.
Yes, that's so good. Oh my god, I forgot about that.
And I think they made little charms and stuff out of those characters. It's like a running joke through the series. But so we're going to take a break, come back with some shout outs, and then probably go home and read some more Bleach. We'll see you in a bit.
America. We are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. At Grand Canyon University, we believe in equal opportunity, and the American dream starts with purpose. To serve others in ways that promote human flourishing and create a ripple effect of transformation for generations to come. Find your purpose at Grand Canyon University. Private, Christian, affordable. Visit gcu.edu.
All right, and we are back, and we're just going to do a couple of quick shout outs and then make our way out of here. Christopher, do you want to lead us off with anything? What have you got? Because I'm still thinking of mine.
Well, we've got some enlightened self-interest today. We just got the files in. We're writing up a whole thing about this. We just got the files in for our next manga license for MSX, the Mangasplaining Extra newsletter, and the first volume translation has come in from the translator, and we're actually just about to start lettering it, and we're going to announce it any day now and release the first chapter. So I've been working on this for about 18 months. And manga licensing takes a long time especially when you're not established. But I'm so hyped that this is finally happening. This is finally coming together because I think people are going to be really happy with this work. And I think it's going to maybe create sort of a chain reaction. This is our next book is by an author who hasn't been translated into English yet. And I think it's going to be super cool. And hopefully it'll mean a lot of their other work gets translated as well, because it's a really, really cool book. Any day now we'll be able to announce it, and that will be fun. So that's my shout out. Mangasplainingextra.com, or I don't know, links in the podcast description here, or on the website, or on the Twitter. It's very easy to get to. Go subscribe. It's free to subscribe. Mangasplainingextra.com.
You need like a jingle so that it gets stuck in people's heads.
Mangasplainingextra.com.
There you go. Deb, how about you? What have you got for us?
Well, as Chris mentioned, I was in Japan last week, and on my last night, I went to see the Blue Giant movie, which was so delightful, and I'm so glad I made the effort to see it. It basically condenses all of volumes 5 through 10 in one movie.
Oh, really?
Uh-huh.
Is that the one we read, volume 5?
We read volume 5 and 6.
Oh, awesome.
And then
cool.
It tells the entire story up to volume 10, which is that first arc. It's really delightful. And the music really, you finally get a sense everyone in the manga, everyone talks about how wonderful Dai's music is. It's all of a sudden you can hear it. And it's this is great. I mean, some things are definitely condensed, and some moments, I think, character building moments that really give you a sense of the depth of each character's arc and development is missing. And the ending is slightly different, but in a satisfying way, such that you could just watch it and feel like, I got everything I needed out of Blue Giant. Even if I watched anything, although there's a part of the end where it like leads to opening if they ever decide to make another Blue Giant movie and a Blue Giant Supreme, but we shall see, because that still hasn't gotten licensed in English yet either. But it was worth it. I was really happy I went. I understand just enough Japanese to kind of get what's going on.
Yeah.
And of course,
Plus,
I read.
you're a super fan of the manga.
Oh yeah, and plus they had an amazing program you could buy. Like it was shaped like a record album.
Oh wow!
And you could pull it out, and it looked like had this gloss finish that looked like a record, and it was like about a 30-page booklet with interviews and with all the creators and the voice actors and the director, had character sketches and all kinds of behind the scenes stuff, and it made you feel like, damn, movie going in Japan is next level.
Like they really know their target audience. That's wild.
Yeah. In the lobby because with the Demon Slayer movie as well, there was all kinds of souvenirs you could buy for Demon Slayer. And it's like, oh, this is something else. I highly recommend it. If you can understand a little Japanese, it's a fun experience.
Cool.
Deb, did you know that the movie was going to start at Volume 5 when you started us with Volume 5?
No, it was a delightful surprise.
Wow, you are plugged in. That's awesome.
Yeah, Deb is a genius. People really don't realize that enough, I think.
Yeah.
Chip, how about you? Do you have anything you want to shout out?
Sadly, no. I have consumed almost nothing. Well, I mean, maybe not nothing. I've been watching a new season of Taskmaster, which I've already mentioned on this show.
Oh, yeah. Nice.
And with every season of Taskmaster, I develop a crush on one or more of the contestants. So, yeah, that's been fun. But that's it. That's my life. I do podcasts and I make comics and incredibly
You write a
tired,
newsletter too.
Sad. And I write a newsletter.
It's just Zdarsky.substack.com, right?
Zdarsky.substack.com, yeah. Yeah, I'm doing a lot of planning because I'm doing a road trip to promote comic books. So I don't just make comic books. I go to shops and I try and hand sell them to people. So that's my plan. It'll be fun doing this on the road.
Where will you be? When will this be?
I'm doing a big chunk of Canada basically for the entire month of May, signing every second day in a new shop in a new city.
Wild.
Yeah. It's gonna be something to hold up in weird hotel rooms trying to do this podcast, trying to read Pluto.
Way to go.
It's gonna be great.
Yeah.
Cool.
David, what's your newsletter?
Do I have? Oh yeah, tinyletter.com/superdavidbros, which doesn't really make sense as any kind of username or nickname, but I've been writing brothers that way since I was a child because of Mario.
Yeah.
If you don't know,
But
because of Mario.
because of the Mario.
Yeah, the Marios of the New Jersey Marios.
Yeah.
Earlier when Christopher said, I think Chip and Deb also agreed that like finding Bleach at the right age is very important. And something else I found when I was very young was Spider-Man. Like Spider-Man was my first comic. It's one of my favorite things ever. And I kind of dip in and out of reading the comics these days. But the most recent run, written by Zeb Wells, mostly drawn by John Romita Jr., one of like the all-time greatest Spider-Man artists ever, has been really fun.
Yeah.
And the first story arc is like a 4-parter with Tombstone, who is one of my most favorite Spider-Man villains.
It's really good.
It's so good. So that's my shout out. Any comic you have within like arm's distance that has Tombstone or is written by Zeb Wells or drawn by John Romita Jr., check one of those out. If you can get all 3, jackpot. Way to go.
Yeah, I'm gonna double shout out that because I don't read a lot of the Marvel DC books for a variety of reasons. But I really love Zeb as a person, and I find him really funny and charming in real life, and I love John Romita Jr., so I'm like, oh, I'll check it out in my PDFs that I get from Marvel. And it's super fun. Like it has a real classic feeling, and the jokes land. And Tombstone is kind of better than he's ever been before as a character. Like, yeah, it's a real treat. Yeah,
they really Charlie Brown Peter Parker up, which is something I really like about the character. At one point, he has a birthday party, and the splash page is them yelling, "Go away, Peter Parker," and everyone looks disappointed that he's there. Just stuff like that. Classic Spider-Man stuff.
It's good. It's good. Solid.
Yeah. And that has been an episode of Mangasplaining, I think. We read Bleach Volume 1 in 55 by Tite Kubo. We shouted out some cool stuff, and hopefully we enlightened all of our listeners as to all the different perspectives there are on the masterpiece that is Bleach. Anyway, we will see y'all next time.
Except, why is it called Bleach?
Oh yeah,
sounds cool. I think someone asked him this after the series ended, and he was like, it just had a cool sound, a cool feel. He also designed like the logo with the flames coming out of the side. Yeah, which I feel like says all you need to know about Bleach.
Yeah, it's same name as Nirvana's first album, right? He likes music. Someone pin him down on that. If you have access to Tite Kubo, you'd be like, come on, Nirvana, just admit it.
Yeah.
If only someone had interviewed him at some point and could have asked it at the time, but oh well.
We'll have to engineer another one.
I tried, but I have a sensitivity towards asking the questions that would have an artist look at me like, seriously, that's what you want to use your time with me to ask?
I have no shame, so hook me up. I will make it happen. But that has been an episode of Mangasplaining. We will catch y'all next week. This has been Mangasplaining, episode 93, Bleach. Thanks for listening. For our next episode, we'll be discussing the manga Pop Team Epic. Want to pick up a copy? Consider supporting your local comic book and manga specialty shop. Find one near you at comicshoplocator.com or check out your local library for print and digital lending options. You can also follow along with our complete reading list at mangasplaining.com and check out our newsletter and digital publishing endeavor at mangasplainingextra.com. Thanks to DADS for the musical accompaniment of this episode.